All right, so we have Anthony joining us, who was at one time on the board, correct? The board.
Travis Central Appraisal District Board, yes.
Yep. Okay. And so I reached out to him and we kind of chatted back and forth about the new laws that are coming out, or the new law that's being proposed. And so, or bill, however you want to call that. So I wanted to get his take on it. I'm going to have him go through kind of a little bit of what the bill is and what it's aimed to do. And then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of it. Anthony, jump right in, man.
All right. Yes, we finally got an agreement by our state legislature to provide property tax relief. There are a couple components to it. One is a constitutional amendment that we all have to approve to increase the homestead exemption from 40,000 to 100,000. So that will be on the November ballot that we all get to vote for. The last time they increased it to 40,000, it passed by 85%. So everybody anticipates that that will pass this November. We all get to vote for it. And what that will do is, if you own a home and you filed a homestead exemption on your home, the appraisal district will decrease the taxable value by $100,000. So if you have a $300,000 house, you only pay the school tax, the school M&O tax of $200,000. If you have $1 million home, you pay $900,000. And if you got a home less than $100,000, guess what? You pay zero school taxes. And you might wonder, well, nobody has a house less than $100,000. Actually, there are 397 school districts in Texas that have an average home value of less than $100,000. They're not in Austin, they're not in Houston, San Antonio, Dallas. They're in West Texas, East Texas, right? Places that you and I probably don't want to live, but we have over 1,000 school districts, and 397 of them have home values less than 100,000. So they will pay zero property taxes to the schools. They'll still pay city, county taxes, ESD, things like that. So it won't be completely zero, but their school taxes will be taken away. The other components are a reduction in the school taxes by 10.7 cents. So right now, the minimum that a school district can charge on their property taxes, their M&O taxes, is around 82 cents. And they are hoping to lower that by 10.7 cents. So it will be 70 something cents. Unfortunately, there's a big loophole in there that I want to express, where all of the school tax rates have to be within 10% of each other. And if it's not, then that maximum or that minimum rate will be at that level. So while they're trying to lower it by 10.7 cents, in actuality, it might actually be a little bit higher, especially in areas like Austin, where our home values are increasing. But there is a possibility if another area, the values are declining and they have to increase their tax rates to get the same taxes, well, our values all have to be equitable across all of Texas. And this was a big loophole that happened last year, where they couldn't lower our school taxes by the 2.5% limit because some other school district didn't get the valuation increases that they were expecting. So we hit the floor rate with that maximum compression rate. But the attempt is to lower it by 10.7 cents. Elderly people get a little bit higher increase in their exemptions. And they are also giving a 20% cap for everybody else. So if you don't own a home, you are taxed on the market value of your property, investment properties, rental properties. And as a pilot program, they're going to put a cap on that. Instead of being unlimited, like, all of our values rose 40, 50% last year or 2 years ago. Now there's going to be a cap that applies to rental homes and commercial properties of 20%. So the market value cannot increase by more than 20% in any 1 year. And that was a compromise that was achieved by the house, because the house wanted it to be 5% across the board, including commercial. But that was a sticking point when they negotiated that they wouldn't give it. So they compromised at 20%, and they're going to pilot it for 3 years to see how it goes. And
Sorry, I just saw this comment. It made me laugh. Well, Austin home values are declining the most in the country. That's actually not true, but okay.
Well, that's a good point. That 20%, it's not going to happen because we are in a declining market. We peaked, as you guys know, last year. So commercial properties, home values are not going up 20% this year and probably not going up next year. So we're not going to see it, right? We could have used that 2 years ago, right, when they were appreciating 20. But so it's in there and it sounds good, but in all reality, if the Fed keeps rates up, values have stabilized to coming down, and so nobody will actually see that. But you have the assurance now. At least there's an upper limit that it can only increase by 20%.
So I want to get back to the rentals and the 20% because that's going to impact a lot of people that have rentals. I mean, I have 3 in the state of Texas. So that's something that is worrisome for me that they only did 20%. So, but we'll get back to that. So based on this $100,000 and what they've done, what are the pros of this and what are the cons of this?
Well, if you're a homeowner, you get to knock off $100,000. That's good. And for all homeowners, you will see $100,000 knocked off. You multiply that by the school tax rate, and they're estimating that on an average home of $500,000 in the Austin area, we could see about a $3,000 savings. So that's good. The con of it, if you're not a homeowner, if you rent or you own commercial property, you don't see any of that. All you will see is hopefully a 10 cents lowering of the school taxes. So in Austin area, let's say it's about 2.2%. So the total tax rate will go to 2.1% roughly. If everything, so you'll get something, not a lot, right? 10 cents of a $500,000 home is $500. So renters, commercial property owners on a regular home will see 10 cents multiplied by your value. So $500 on a $500,000 home is about what you'll see.
So independent of interest rates, do you see this improving the amount of loan applications for people to get houses? So the affordability, in a sense, because their monthly payments will be lower.
Sure, because the tax rate will hopefully be lowered by some extent, right? So when you pay and get a mortgage, you pay the interest rate, right, to the bank, plus the taxes. A lot of people escrow them, and together that creates your monthly payment. So if your tax rate goes down by 10 cents and your homestead exemption is $100,000, that will allow you to afford more of a home slightly, right? Independent of a home. So net, it should be good. But what I'll say is this. If we look at the bigger picture, our home values in Texas the last 2 years have increased 40-50%. My home, they increased my home from the 3s to 600,000 2 years ago. And yeah, it went down last year a smidgen. It's still in the 6 range. So I hit that 10% cap. Like the vast majority of homeowners hit that 10% cap. So our taxable value is going up 10% next year, right? Because home values haven't gone down that much. They've only gone down 5-10%, right? So if you hit that homestead, we still got 2 or 3 years of going up 10% each year. And so if the taxing entities don't lower their tax rates, we still would pay 10% more because we haven't reached our market value in our homes. Most homeowners with the homestead exemption is still capped at that 10%. So taxes were going to go up 10%. They're trying to compress it a little bit, but they're going to compress the rate a little bit And so instead of that $3,000 figure that they're saying on a $500,000 home, it might be like half of that we'll actually see in our pocketbooks. So maybe $1,500 on a $500,000 home, because our taxable values for homeowners are going to go up 10% because they went up 50% or more the last couple of years. And I think that's why the Senate held out. They didn't want to do the House's plan, which was 16 cents of lowering the rate across the board, because they realized that homeowners' values are going to go up 10%. If they just lowered it by 16 cents, you wouldn't have even noticed it, right? Because it would have been washed out with the 10% increase in our taxable values. So the homestead exemption, that is a big exemption. $100,000 off your house, is quite a bit. So we will see some effect, but a lot of that will be somewhat paid for by renters and commercial property owners. But I'll say this, though, if you're a commercial property owner, because values are declining, you will see that immediate benefit next year, right? When they value your value down, say 10%, 20%, you pay that market value, right? There's no cap on the decline. And because we are a declining market, commercial and renters should see that right away, where homeowners won't, because values went up 50%, homeowners will still get 10% increase. So for the next 2 or 3 years, homeowners will be bearing a larger share of the tax burden because of the cap, where commercial and renters will see any immediate decrease because that's applied directly. And so the Senate knew that, and the Senate was like, well, we can't do what the House wanted. We have to do something so that people feel it, and the only way to do that is with a homestead exemption. But what that means is the commercial property owners will end up paying a little bit more. You'll still see something, but it won't be a big decline as it could have been if they didn't do the homestead exemption.
So basically what you're saying is they're still going to increase your values 10% this year, or potentially for most homeowners, or still potentially just raise the tax rate, even though it's showing that they're going to have this deduction. So what I'm hearing is that while it sounds great that they're doing $100,000 deduction or reduction, really it's going to be kind of washed by a 10% increase.
Yeah, not quite a wash,
but close.
The taxing entities should be lowering their tax rates, right? The cities and the counties, they have a 3.5% cap on how much they can raise revenue. And if they raise more than that because of high values, they have to lower the tax rate. So the city and the county did lower the tax rate last year by a few pennies, not much. And the school districts have been lowering them. Their cap is 2.5%. So they're supposed to lower them to meet that. But there's a lot of loopholes for the counties and the cities to employ. When they issue bonds, when they call bond elections, that increases the tax rate. And the law allows them, well, if voters approved your bond, well, then you can charge whatever tax rate to pay those bonds off. And that's not capped by that 2.5%, 3.5% cap that they have. So schools, so the way that the schools and the cities get around this is they jam a lot of bonds and get people to vote to keep that tax rate elevated, which they did the last 2 years. And now that rates are declining, or values are declining, they can keep that rate up, saying, well, you guys approved all these bonds, Project Connect, and so that's why we have to keep the tax rate where it is, even though they're still receiving more valuations every year from increased taxable value, right? Values will be going up for the foreseeable future. Even though overall the market went down, you'll still see values go up because all the homesteaders will be increased by 10% until we reach market value.
So let's say people are voting to pass this. Last time it was 85% of people said, yes, we need to pass the lowering the property taxes. Let's say this passes in November. When do you think it will be instituted?
Yeah.
When do you think it will go into
homestead
effect?
cap will be instituted for next year's tax bill. And so when they vote on November, then when you get that's going to be interesting, because I was a director at the CAD. they're frantically right now updating their computer systems because they give us our statement of our values in January, and it will be reflected in your assessment next year, right? You will see that next year when you get your valuation. You'll be able to deduct. It should be $100,000 lower for the school taxes. Yeah.
So
and TCAD didn't have a meeting in July, but they were talking about it in May, what they're going to do, and they were like frantic because they have to update all their systems this year to reflect that, because they have to give the values to the school districts and the cities and the counties with these exemptions, and that's going to be interesting for them to get that all done. But it's not, the homestead doesn't really happen until November, but we're pretty much sure nobody's going to vote no on a tax decrease, a homestead exemption decrease. So it's pretty much a done deal. It's a formality because it's a constitutional amendment, so the people have to vote on it, plus the state legislatures. So there's a process, but that will go into effect.
So the question on this is, so it doesn't affect this year. It does affect this year because taxes are paid in arrears. So you pay your taxes at the end of, or in January, basically December. So it does affect this year. It's just you don't pay your property taxes.
Yeah, the taxes were due January 31st for last year, but yeah, we don't have a tax bill due now until, the bill will come out in November, December. Some people pay in December. I wait till January 30th to write them the check of next year, but it will affect your January bill of next year for people that pay in one lump sum. People that escrow, right, you don't feel it, but when they recalculate your escrow and they get the tax bill that's coming out in November, it should reflect the changes in the taxes.
That's actually a really good point. So people that are escrowing it in, you would recommend that they reach out to their mortgage provider if they don't hear from them by whatever the taxable time is next year. So let's say April or May of next year. Yes?
Yes, yeah. It'll, they won't get a bill until November, and then they'll use that bill to recalculate their escrow and any buffers that they have in it. But, when you escrow, you pay usually a 15% buffer. And so your taxable value is going up 10% most likely. So these changes, it won't affect it, right? They'll look at it, well, you're in the 15% buffer, and they probably won't increase it, but they'll just say you have to keep on paying the same amount in your escrow account every month. So you might not even notice it if you're escrowing it.
Right. So that's why I titled this. I think Jason Payne, love you in the comments, man. He said, I'm happy about this. I wonder if the title is just to get your attention. Well, I think the title, the tax bill, Texas tax bill bad for future homeowners. Well, the reality is what we're saying here is that it sounds good, but it may not do enough to actually make a big dent in people's wallets. And so that's why I titled it that way. One question I have for you, Anthony. So when I protested a property here in Travis County this year, I had all the comps in the world that showed that this property was at least $100,000 less, if not more, than actually it was about $150,000 less than what the taxing entity was using. Now they were using comps for completely different neighborhoods. They went to completely different schools. And when we went round and round with them, they're like, well, the comps you're giving us don't fit our model. And they would never explain what their model was. They never would give me any insight. And I'm saying, but I'm giving you comps that are in the exact neighborhood that closed at the exact time that fit this. And you're saying they don't fit, but you're being very obtuse and telling me that they fit this random thing that you won't even show me how they fit in your metrics. So that was a big frustration I had this year when I was doing my property taxes and protesting them myself. So the biggest issue is that I have with the taxing district, and you may have some more insight about this, is that they don't really tell you, or they don't make it clear on really the best way to protest your taxes or even how the system works. Do you have any insight on that, why it's like that? Or is it just this?
They know the neighborhood that you're in, the subdivision that you're in, they should be pulling comps from that neighborhood. And so when you protest, did you only go to the informal or did you go all the way to the formal hearing with the ARB?
I don't bother going to the
Oh,
formal
you used
because
pro tax. Okay.
yeah. No, I did it myself this year. I did the informal.
Oh, you did just the informal. So you
There's
didn't want to go.
I can't tell you how many people have emailed me and said, you're right, I went to the formal and it was a waste of time.
Well, so I didn't. I protested for a friend of my wife's. They're in Williamson County, and yes, when you go to the informal, they have their rules, they have their guidelines, but they will stick with it. If you give them data, I find when you give them data in your neighborhood, they should use them or have a good reason not to. But that informal, if you don't get the answer that you want, then you need to go to the ARB, which are just regular citizens, generally older retired folks that will listen to you. And if you just make a simple argument to them, they will usually give you something. And I did that. So yes, I went to them, I showed them the data, and they weren't convinced. I said, all right, fine, let's go to the ARB. So I went to ARB. It was 3 older people. And I just laid out my case. And they're like, okay, you're right. Now, they didn't give me what I really thought it was worth, but they listened to me and lowered it. You know, the appraisal district didn't want to do anything, but the ARB is usually willing to work with you if you give them data, and they will listen to reason. And the CAD, they'll cite law and different things, but it should be in the neighborhood. And you just go to ARB, hey, this is in the neighborhood, it's sold for X. And I always use their data against them. I go, what are your comps? And if there's something that's not valid, I throw it out. If it didn't sell last year, you throw it out, right? Sometimes they try to use data of homes that didn't sell in 10 years, but they say it's equitable because they didn't protest, so that's the value. Well, no, you can throw that out. They have to use actual sales data from the last year of sales, and that's the market. And if you said that you showed them that data and they sold in the last market and it was in the same neighborhood, they should have accepted it. And I'm sorry that they didn't, but they should have.
I think what Jeremy's asking is, do you know a secret way to find out what their model is?
Yeah, I mean, because they're very obtuse about it. They don't even explain what their model is.
Well, you have a right to request all of the data that they use, all of the comps. So when you protest, check that checkbox. I think in TCAD it's just a checkbox, and they'll send you all the comps to use. In Williamson County, they actually send it to you when you get your statement now, right? They just send you the comps. So once you have that, your compatible values. They won't tell the actual sales date, but you guys have access to MLS. You can go and see the actual sales date. They'll have adjusted prices on there because they can't disclose it. They'll have adjusted prices saying, oh, this house is bigger or smaller than yours, and then they'll have an adjusted price. But once you go there in person, then they'll tell you the actual sales price. But you know what it is. You guys are realtors, so always ask for the comps that they use.
My experience, sorry to cut you off. My experience with going to the formal is I gave all of that information exactly how you laid it out. I used their comps against them. All 3 of them went, yeah, no, we agree. And then they look at that taxing entity person and that they go, no, I don't agree. And they go, she doesn't agree. I'm like, what the heck? So that was my experience. So if anybody else has had that experience, drop it in the comments. I want to keep going on this though, because for the people that aren't able to homestead, maybe they have an investment property, maybe it's they have multiple homes and they travel in between the two. With a 20% or 20% cap, I did the valuation on that. That means on one of my properties that has gone up, it doubled in taxes. That means that they can still on one property increase it another $1,800 a year by just capping at 20%. So what do you think about the 20%? Does that actually help landlords or does it not?
In a rising market that's rising more than 20%, it will cap your values, right? So, but any cap really doesn't matter because your taxes that you paid is a product of the tax rate and your valuation. So if all the property value, say we are in the rising market, and let's say the market is going up 100% next year. All right, we got that 20%. So now it's capped to 20%. Well, the taxing entities would just change the rate so that you end up still paying more. So this is the thing about the caps, and where, you know, the house bond at a 5% cap, those caps are artificial. At the end of the day, it's the taxing entities that set the tax rates after they get the valuations that determine the taxes that you pay. So the valuation is a sideshow. It determines the slice of the pie that you pay of taxes. It's not your taxable values. So it's another distraction in the complicated world of how our property taxes work, that it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's a product of the tax rates and the valuation of your home. And if everybody gets the cap, well, then there's no changes. You still pay the same share, the same percent of taxes as somebody else with the same size house. So it'll make you feel good, but it doesn't really matter. The value of your home just determines the piece of the pie of taxes that you pay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the whole reason they were doing this, they're giving, as of right now, 18 billion back to the schools. So that was supposed to give relief, because if you look at the taxes, regardless if you're a homeowner or you're a landlord or whatever, the biggest share, I mean, the absolute largest share of the taxes is schools, especially in Texas. Earlier, you were talking about homes that have or worth $100,000 don't pay any, according to this bill, won't pay any taxes. Well, we still have recapture in Austin. So half of our taxes go back to the state to be then sent to other school districts. But I thought that's $18 billion is supposed to help eliminate some of that and give relief.
Well,
but it doesn't sound like it's going to give very much relief, because cities are still going to tax how they're going to tax.
That's the theory, is that they use 18 billion of a $30 billion surplus to buy down the school taxes, right? So they compress the rate, they increase the homestead exemption, but the schools still get the same amount of money. And so yeah, on $100,000, you don't have to pay any school taxes. Well, the schools still need their money. So yeah, the state will fill the gap with that $18 billion that they set aside in the budget. But I don't think they're going to actually spend that 18 billion. It's probably going to be under 10 billion at the end of the day, because of what I said before, was the requirement that all the school tax rates need to be within 10% of each other for equity, right? People in Austin need to pay about 80 cents for M&O, and also the people in East Texas need to pay 80 cents, right? This is because the state was sued by the legislature years ago, went up to the court, and they said, hey, you need a fair system where every kid gets about the same amount of money and every person pays about the same percentage. So our school tax rate can never deviate by more than 10% from the high and the low. And if it does, then anybody that would lower their tax, like Austin, you could fund your whole school with a 40-cent tax rate, because the valuation is so high. But that's not fair, because the people in East Texas, whose average house is only $150,000, they have to pay a higher rate. So they tried to make it equal, that every person, whether in East Texas, West Texas, or Austin, pays roughly within 10% of the same tax rate. And because of that requirement, that's a huge loophole that keeps the tax rates up. And unless they get rid of that, which they can't, because it went to court, and the court said that's the only thing that makes it barely legal, our system of funding education, Austin always has to pay about 80 cents. And then anything extra, we give it to the state, and they give it to the poor areas of East Texas and West Texas, so that they can get about $10,000 per student to spend on, and Austin can get about $10,000 per student.
Just for clarity, Anthony, do you know this? Do you know what other major cities in Texas, or if other major cities in Texas are also going through this recapture process? So like, is Dallas, Fort Worth area doing that? Houston doing that?
Every school district in Central Texas, Pflugerville is in recapture. Round Rock is in recapture. Eanes ISD, anywhere
Dripping
that
Springs.
has very quick growth is now in recapture. Pflugerville was the last holdout in Central Texas, and even now that they are, because of the valuations growing so much and their enrollment going down, they're in recapture. Now, the state did lower the recapture amount in this last legislative session, so it won't be as much as it was. They've reduced it some, but it's still a significant portion of what they're paying because of because we're a big state and we have a lot of poor areas and rich areas. We have to equalize that out. And
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't an attack on Austin type conversation, right? People need to understand.
No, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Right.
Most big school districts in urban centers are in recapture. Right. And Austin though pays the highest chunk though. Austin ISD pays the highest chunk because we have the highest values, right, in the whole state.
That's
Austin,
right now. So if our values dip, then we won't be paying the highest amount.
Right. If our values dip, then yeah, right, it won't. But yeah, it's only dipped a little bit, so Austin will still be paying a fair share.
So the question I have then is for substantial change to actually help out homeowners, what could have been? I'm frustrated because I see all the lawmakers patting themselves on the back. We did this huge, big thing. It's amazing. It's great. And I'm more skeptical than most people, but I looked at it and went, hold on a second. This doesn't smell right. It doesn't smell like it's actually going to help people. And now it will, but it's not going to be this big, significant tax change like they've made it. For this bill, what do you think would have been different or what could have been done different that would have actually been substantial change?
Well, the House's original plan was to use all of the $18 billion to do an across the board tax rate reduction of about 16 cents. Right?
Okay.
So that means whether you own commercial property or homesteaded, you would have lowered the tax rate by 16 cents, and then the 18 billion would just go to the school fund, and then and so that, even that, because our values are increasing as homestead by 10%, you wouldn't have seen the full effect of it. But over time, we need to get that rate down as much as we can. And doing it across the board, in my opinion, that's what I want. I wanted the House's plan to just reduce that rate. And there are some long-term plans out there that suggest that we can eliminate the school M&O tax rate in 8 to 10 years if they use the surplus and they apply it towards buying down that school tax rate. And they limit state spending by inflation plus growth. So if the state spending is 5% and then any extra, you take that and buy down the rate, you could potentially eliminate that. And I like that plan. And I think it is feasible because you know what? The $30 billion surplus that they have this year would have paid for the entire school M&O budget of 5 years ago. 5 years ago, if you look at the school, all of the taxes that were collected in all the school districts across the state was about $35 billion. So we could have been there today if we didn't keep spending more and more at the state level. But every year they get raises and they need more money, and so it does go up. But that is a long-term plan that I've seen that has some merit because we have a huge surplus. We have $30 billion surplus, and that could have paid for all of our school taxes if we kept our school budgets the same as 5 years ago. They're not. Now they're almost double, but driving down that rate, eliminating that rate. So if you're at 2% in the Austin area and you get rid of 80 cents of it and you're at 1.2 at some point, that's, people will feel that. If we can get into the 1% something, it would be significant. Westlake and Eanes, they're in the 1%, but the rest of us are still between 2 and 3%. But we need to drive down that rate. Exemptions, caps, all of that is a sideshow. It just shifts the taxes, right? You can increase the exemption, right? They can say they increase the exemption to $500,000 so that most homes in Austin pay zero. Well, it doesn't mean that the taxing entities get nothing. It just means that the renters and the non-homeowners end up paying more for it. So exemptions just shift it, right? A cap on appraisals. If they said that appraisals are 2%, like what they do in California, or inflation 3% in California, that doesn't do anything. Capping your appraisals doesn't mean anything because they could just increase the tax rates to collect more money. So all those gimmicks that they talk about are just sideshows that make you feel good that you're doing something, but they're designed to fool the average Joe about what they're paying. And really, we just need to continue to lower the tax rates to really make a change. There is one other thing that we haven't talked about that they also did, which is another sideshow, but I think it should be pointed out that they added to it because it was my former position. They're going to go to elected board of directors, 3 of them, on the central appraisal districts. So right now, the appraisal districts are appointed by the largest taxing entities in the counties, the cities, the school districts. They get to appoint somebody and they go on there and they represent the cities and the taxing entities. They hire the chief appraiser and they approve the budget and they approve the process for appraising properties. Well, now, instead of being appointed, at least 3 of them in counties over 75,000, they will be elected. So you could go and be elected to the appraisal board and be one of 9 people that decides how the chief appraiser and how we appraise property. On top of that, they are going to elected ARB members. So the people that hear your case, right? If you go to the formal hearings, right now that's done by an administrative judge. They appoint people, retired people to that. Well, now it's going to go back to the board of directors of the appraisal district to elect them. 2 of them have to be, it's still a board decision, but 2 have to be of the elected members, not the appointed members, to elect those people. So you could elect somebody to the board, and then they could appoint somebody to the ARB. So if you want somebody that's taxpayer friendly, you get them on the board, and that's supposed to be more taxpayer friendly. But again, that's a feel good measure, right? We're gonna elect board members to the appraisal district, but what are they gonna do? They can't just go and lower all of our values by 50%. They still have to adhere to state law, which says has to be market value. They can put a chief appraiser that's taxpayer friendly, but again, if the chief appraiser lowers all of our values by 50%, well, the comptroller comes in, audits them, and if they don't reach 10% of the actual values, then they take away funding from the school district. So you still have to appraise. So the board at the CADs are important, but again, it's another sideshow to make it sound like they're doing something, but it doesn't really lower your taxes who's on that board. It kind of runs itself as an administrative position. But it's interesting that now we'll be able to elect them and hire who do you want to be on the Central Appraisal District Board, and you get to pick 3 in Travis County.
Well,
Now,
choose, as I say, choose correctly, but it doesn't matter. We're in Travis County.
Yeah.
So why can you help me understand why currently Texas has decided to have a static homestead exemption number like 40 to 100,000 versus a percentage number? If our tax rate is percentage based and all of these other things are percentage based, a static, what that does is as our home prices raise, it doesn't actually, it changes. If you have a $2 million house, but you're only reducing the tax burden by 100,000,
yeah,
it's not as effective as if it was a $300,000 house. If you go from a $300,000 house to now your tax burden is 100,000 less, whoa!
Yeah.
You have a $2 million house, it doesn't do anything. You don't care.
No, you're absolutely. It's because it's in the Texas Constitution. It was written as a fixed amount, and I wasn't around when they did that. But what I would say is, people that are sensitive to the poorest among us would say that you want a fixed amount so it benefits the poorest among us. The rich, well, yeah, a percentage would benefit them more disproportionately than the rich. But unfortunately, when they added the exemption in the state constitution, they did it as a fixed amount versus a percentage. But you're absolutely right. A percentage would be more fair. It would be indexed over time, and it wouldn't require this change. But I think politics is part of it too, because politicians can say, hey, I voted in the legislature to increase exemptions to 100,000, and right, so they can show that they're doing something, right? Because I heard them saying, well, we increased it from 20,000 to 40,000 last year. It gives them something to run on every few years. Right. But it doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day, but it's a feel good.
And that exactly is why I'm so skeptical when I hear politicians say how amazing of a job they did, because, okay, well, you're not explaining to people that 20 to 40 really just not going to mean much, because we now are going to assess your home even more this year. So that 20 to 40, I wouldn't say is a wash, but it's not really going to protect you. The question Andy just asked right here, and I think a lot of people are asking this question, is this relief, which I'll use the word relief lightly, just a 1-year thing?
Well, all of most of the provisions, yeah, they set to expire in like 3 years. I'm sure they'll renew them, but the homestead exemption is in the Constitution. So once you approve it, you can't undo it without another referendum vote by the people, and they're never going to get rid of it. So that 100,000 won't change most likely, because it's too difficult to remove a constitutional amendment. But the tax rate, the 10 cents and all that, yeah, that's subject to change every time the legislature comes into play, and it gives them something else to run on and say that they've done. So usually they won't increase it. They haven't. They have a steady track record of lowering the school tax rate. In 2005, it was 1.5%. The lowest, the M&O rate was 1.5%. In 2005, they lowered it by 50 cents. They went from 1.5% to 1%. And then in 2019, they started lowering by 8 cents. So that's why we're at like 82 cents now, because they started compression since 2019. But for a while, it was 1.5%. Then they went to 1% for 10 years. And now for the last 5 years, they've been lowering it incrementally 8 to 6 cents a year as they try to get it down to hopefully zero at some point. So it gives them something to talk about that they do every year, that they're lowering property taxes, but it's not fast enough for most people. It's still, right. We still pay one of the highest property tax rates in the nation.
So to answer that question that just popped up, and to kind of satisfy this conversation, where does that number come from? And correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony or Jeremy, I believe that comes from the median price point of Austin. But this kind of goes back to what I was saying. If your home is less than 400,000, or sorry, your appraised value is currently less than 400,000, and you have a homestead, you're going to win. If it's 600, 700 or higher, it's not going to do a whole heck of a lot. That's what it sounds like you're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they'll if it's not homesteaded, you'll see something. It probably won't increase next year. It'll decrease something, but not significant amount of money. You might be $700 on a $500,000 home. Yeah. So that 1.2 to 1.8, and actually that's for all of Texas that they come up with that. So the average in Texas is 330,000, right? The average in Austin is 500,000. So you can almost double that for Austin, and so that's for the average home across Texas. Remember, Texas has 254 counties. There's a lot of counties that have very low valuations. So 330 sounds cheap to us, but it's not cheap in East Texas.
Yeah. So just to clarify that, so if we're talking Eanes ISD, where $4 million gets you a basic house, then you're not going to see that. You're going to see maybe a $300 decrease in value, like
it'll be more than that. They'll still see, you multiply the taxable values by 0.1, so 10 cents. So yeah, they'll see that, because that's on $1 million, that's $1,000. So 2 million will be $2,000. Because
Right.
they're
Going
lowering
back
the
to
tax
what
rate.
you're saying, they're lowering the tax rate, but the values will likely increase, and so it's going to squeeze that number down.
Yes, right. The values will go up 10%. So you got to take out the 10% increase plus the compression and see where you're at. Yeah.
I'm with Kevin on that one.
Yeah. So
If it's
whatever,
next-
yeah, whatever savings I get, I will, which won't be much, I don't think, will be spent on Tesla stock. So the problem still persists, though. Even, I mean, I didn't really understand where the 1.8 to 1.2 to 1.8 expected savings was coming from and how that was going to get it. But that's, I don't want to take too much more time. But my question really is for those people that, the people that aren't, that this isn't going to help, again, is going to be landlords paying more in taxes, because now I still have to keep, raising potentially my, my rents, because it doesn't look like it's going to actually go down next year, right? It looks like it's going to probably still go up. So how do we?
Your valuations are going down, right? The market is going down. So
that's not true. That's not true, because this year my value, the value of the property that I have, they had it like 535. The value, if I actually wanted to sell that house, was 425. So literally 100,000 less. And they tried to increase it another $80,000 on top of that. And I protested and got it back down to the value they had it at. That's still like tax assessed 100,000 more than I could even sell it for. So the values are still going up.
The issue is, a lot of people, when they say the values are going down, they're comparing it to this time last year, not to the 3 years or 4 years prior where they've owned the house and they've homesteaded it and it's not spiking at 60, 70, 80%.
Yeah. Well, you should see it next year, because when they valued it as of January 1st, remember last year, the first 6 months, it shot up, and the last 6 months it shot down. So when you look at the whole aggregate data, yeah, it still looked like it went up, but they should have looked at the last 6 months when it was declining. But when they revalue it next year for January 1st, you'll have a full year of data of declining markets. So it should go down, and whatever it goes down, you will, as a commercial property owner, you should see that back. And then if you don't, you protest the heck out of it and go to the ARB and tell them, because yeah, that the market better than anyone. You're a realtor, and it shouldn't be going up next year. You can give them last year, because half the year it did go up and then it went down. But still, if they're doing the right thing, which they should be doing, they should be reporting it next year. And you have avenues to protest it when you can. But I know a lot of people aren't happy with the process.
Just a little more clarification on what we were talking about, was like what Jeremy was just saying. So if you purchase a house, let's say in 2017, before the pandemic, and you bought it for 250, 300,000, and you homesteaded it and you live there, today your house is worth more, but it was capped at 10% year over year.
Yeah.
So if you purchase that house and your appraised value started at 300,000 or 350, and you had a homestead, there is almost no way that today that home is worth less. So that's what I mean by the property values aren't going down. If you bought it 2 years ago or a year ago, height of the pandemic, then yes, there's a high probability your appraised value is higher. I say a high probability. There is a probability that you have a property that is appraised at a higher value than you can sell it today. I don't know if it's high, because you're also comparing it, the closed properties could be a listing owned by an investor that had to sell. And I mean, they're all that never did have a chance to homestead it. So recent properties that you're trying to sell today, yes. Properties that you've had for 3 years or more, I don't think so. I don't think you can say that the home values are less than what you're currently paying in your appraised value if you had it homesteaded properly and protested.
Yeah, no, I think you got that right. Yeah, if you bought it more than 3 years ago, you're still going to get a taxable value that is 10% higher for those homesteaded properties. But if you're a commercial property owner, you should start seeing it decline because the market is declining. And if it's not, by all means, go protest it. Go to a realtor, get the comps, and tell them. And you know what? Go to the ARB, and then even if you don't get what you want, you can take them to court and sue them, and let a judge decide if you're not getting the answers you want. You have multiple ways of protest. It's a pain, but it's not that bad to go through the appraisal district and do it yourself. That's what I've done a few times over the decades I've been here.
To answer this question for Anur, one of the conversations, and Jeremy, I definitely want to hear your take on this, but an apartment is not the same as a single family dwelling when you have a kid or a dog. And so your rents are, I'm not going to say independent, but they're not a direct correlation, I feel, when you're looking at renting a house.
That's the other loophole in that 20% cap that they're saying. That 20% cap is only applying to 5 million or under. So if you live in an apartment complex that has 100 units, its value is over 5 million. So they're not going to see that that benefit, but it's really not a benefit. Again, it's a feel good measure that makes you think, well, my values are capped at 20%. It's they threw it in there to appease the house, and it's in there, but it doesn't mean much, unfortunately.
So I've seen Nicholas Cage ask this question twice now, and we'll get to it next. But he says, I want to get to this one first. So homeowners with an escrow account set up for property taxes won't see any benefits. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if the taxes go down that you have to pay, and then when they recalculate your monthly payment, you will see it, but it might take a year or two to take effect. What I would say is, if you're escrowing it, well, most likely you can get out of the escrow. You just need 20% equity. So if you've been in your house for more than 2 or 3 years, you probably have 20% equity. Request from the bank to get out of the escrow and just pay it once a year. And guess what? Your payment will drop by $500, $600, $700 a month. You got to learn to save, but take that extra $600, put it in the bank, and write that $7,000, $8,000 check in January. And not only that, you're going to pay 15% less because they won't have that buffer in your escrow account that you have to maintain every month.
Well, and you have the money that you can manage. So go ahead and put it in Tesla.
Yeah. And now you're getting 5% interest rate in a money market account. Put it in there and get 5%. Giving it to an escrow account, first you got to pay 15% more to maintain it, and you're not getting any interest on it. And now the interest rates are high. I'd rather take that $10,000 and invest it. But.
And for most people listening to this, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Anthony, not having an escrow account. The challenge is when you're getting a mortgage, if you're not paying under 20% for a property, they're automatically setting you up as an escrow account. If you're paying 20% down, in my experience, you have to pay additionally to the lien holder to not have an escrow account. I can tell you my last 4 properties I've purchased, I've paid not to have an escrow account because I'm with you. I'd rather put 20 grand in a savings account or put it in a money market account or buy Tesla stock and then have actual extra money when I go to pay my taxes. So not everybody can benefit from that. Get with your loan holder if it's a possibility to do that. The problem with that though is not everybody is good at saying, okay, my taxes this year are going to be around $500 a month, whatever they are. I need to put that into an account on the side. So that's why the escrow accounts are there. So there's a lot of convolutedness there, but not everybody can have it. Not everybody can do it. If you can, and you're good at holding money off to the side, not touching it, I highly recommend not having an escrow account for that.
Yeah, you have to be to judge yourself. Not everybody has that discipline.
Yeah.
But
just to piggyback off of what Jeremy said, one of the reasons why 20% down isn't enough is because you still have closing costs and some other settlement fees or if you're asking for repairs and it gets rolled into the loan, anything like that, that all ends up being more than just a precise 20%. So if you're doing 25%, 30% down, there's a higher probability that you can not pay the escrow.
Yeah.
And also
But
their
you still have
appraised
to pay
value.
a fee.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
still have to pay a fee not to have an escrow account, which I found bizarre, but
Yeah. Well, that advice is for anybody though that has been paying for the last 3 or 5 years. Check your values, and you probably have 20% equity, so you can just request it from the bank. They'll do an analysis of the market values, and yeah, they'll let you go, and then you could avoid the PMI fee too, the private mortgage insurance, which is another few hundred, bucks that you could save, right?
So if you're in the process of refining, that is something maybe you can do in the refi process. Hopefully, a lot of people are talking about rates dropping down. It's a different conversation for a different time. But if interest rates do drop down, you're able to refi, which is going to be tough because, as you've said, or we've talked about, we've seen depression in prices. But that might be an opportunity then to do that. I want to get to Nicholas's. Sherry asked a question. Basically, Sherry, because I have an investment property, they don't want to mess with it. They want me to pay really high taxes. And so they're valuing, and it's not probably just me and my investment property, but they're valuing my property $100,000 more than I can even begin to sell it for. So I just, as we're sitting here, looked at the comps. If I were to sell it right now today, it would be $435 is what I could sell it for. And they're assessing it at $535. So I'm paying taxes on $100,000 more than what I could actually sell the property for. If that makes sense. Yeah. Nicholas has asked this question a couple of times. I want to ask it because this is a unique question. When builders protest new construction assessed values on buyers' behalf, do they tend to win? I've never seen this. And that's why I wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, builders typically don't, right? Remember when the CAD protest, it's as of January 1st. So if a builder builds it, they can build within less than a year. They try to sell it, and then it's the new owner's responsibility to protest it the next January 1st date. So right.
So one of the things there, for those of you that do or don't know, the builders are paying on land value, not occupiable. Oh my God, I just said, I don't even know if that's a word. Not property that can be occupied. So yeah, it's just the land value until it's complete. So it's not the same type of tax.
Right. It's just the land. And then when they call it in the CAD world, improvements to the land, which is a structure, then once that gets assessed, then they would have to pay that. But usually they want to build all that before January 1st, and the tax bill comes and let the new owner pays it.
And this is just a kind of an information on why sometimes you'll find some inventory homes that builders have built. They're complete. They have a certificate of occupancy because now they're going to be responsible or potentially responsible for that increase in taxes because now it's a complete and improved property versus just the land that they had before. So that's why they want to get inventory off the books so they can start.
Well, in theory, they can they get it back, right? You prorate the taxes, and the buyer buys it, unless I'm the buyer, and I always say don't prorate taxes. That's another thing that if you're buying a home, tell your realtors you don't want to prorate the taxes, and you can save yourself thousands of dollars. Not too many people know about that, but that is a thing that you can do if you're a buyer. And sellers they don't know, right? They ask for their taxes and they don't know it's paid for the whole year. But if you want to save a few $1,000, don't prorate your taxes when buying a house.
So Nicholas's example is, I can provide an example: purchased a Perry home and closed 3/29. Perry sent me a letter stating that they were in the process of protesting the value and that I wouldn't have to do anything. I've never heard of this.
You know what that means though? Think about that. That means that Perry completed the home, you bought it, they're protesting for taxes that were paid in the rear so that they can get money back for them. It has nothing to do as a benefit. That's hilarious.
I didn't even think of it that way, Ian. No, you're right. So Perry's tried to save money on taxes. Oh man, that's hysterical.
But if they are protesting it, he will benefit. It's his homestead.
He will, yeah.
And at least it won't be able to go more than 10% up the next year.
Well, and think of it this way too. So Perry has to pay taxes on January 1st to 3/29. If they protest the taxes, which most of those companies cost $100, couple $100 maybe to do it, they're going to save potentially thousands of dollars off of a $100, $200 thing. And potentially because they're trying to pay in their arrears, they're protesting in their arrears. I don't know if they can actually do that, but Perry's trying to save themselves some money, which is where you went with that.
If you're sitting with your, like, I always check this when I'm sitting with my clients, especially so at the title company, when they're talking about your, you have the ability to close the gap in taxes. So if your seller pays X amount and you get your appraised value and it's higher or lower, you're supposed to go back to the seller. If you're the buyer, you're supposed to go back to the seller and say, hey, I overpaid. Let's come to an agreement and meet in the middle. So what's happening is the seller, in this case, is Perry. They're getting their tax benefit. And unless you go back to ask, say, hey, did you save any money? There's nothing. There's also the risk that they didn't save money. They're paying more, and now they could charge you for it. So that's a risk. But I'm sure they're not getting that. I'm sure they're protesting when they know they can save.
Yeah. John's comment here is we homeschool our kids. The tough part about homeschooling your kids or going to private schools, you still pay the taxes regardless.
Yeah, thanks for supporting our traditional schools and not overburdening them with your kids. But you're still paying for it. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's all we have for the hour. If you have more questions about this, put them in the comments below after the video. My email's on there. Send me an email. I don't want to.
Let me close with this. If
Go ahead.
you really want to lower your taxes, there is one other thing you can do. It's not easy, but it's to go fight City Hall, at the school board meetings, at the county commissioner meetings, when they set their tax rates in the summer, right? And they have those public meetings for it. That's when your taxes are really settled. And if we can keep them from increasing the rates higher than they need to be, that will lower our taxes. What the state does, yes, it helps on the global level, but really it's all the taxing entities. It's when they ask us to pass bonds, right? You know, you vote no, they can't issue it, right?
Just to be clear, what you're saying is we need to do a Real Migos live stream at City Hall while they're talking about this, while everybody's making these decisions. Got it. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah. But that's really where it happens. And it's hard, right? We got 5 taxing entities, 6 taxing entities. They all have their public meetings in August and September during vacation, and nobody goes to those meetings. And usually it's just a rubber stamp, whatever they want to spend, they do it. But that is the most effective way to lower our taxes, to keep them from growing. Anything that the state does, all the state has impact is on the school taxes. And yes, they did something, but you know, their overall funding of our schools is going from like 52% to 55%. So at the end of the day, it's not that much, unfortunately. And we'll feel it a little bit as homeowners, but they're only funding schools by 55%, and that's only 3% more than they were before. So
the honest, sad truth. All right. Thanks, everybody. Again, if you have more questions about this, I would say email me, but I'm going to be honest, I probably won't get back to your email if it's about the tax stuff. Drop comments below. Anthony loves the comment in the comments.
Oh, so yeah, I'll watch them online. Yeah. I'll respond.
Anthony's done a very good job in the past of like commenting on stuff. Him and I have gone back and forth a couple times in a good, fun way. I love Anthony coming on. And I love that you came on because I come off hot and heavy on taxes and you're just like the sweetest person about it. So I'm not getting mad at Anthony. Trust me. He's not the problem. But how do you follow Anthony? I just comment on the channel. Anthony's a big fan of the channel. He always comments on here. So if you just put at Anthony on there question, he'll respond for you. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See you.